because the GDPR is currently the most restrictive data protection law as of 2025. Hello and welcome back to Privacy Professional Training. My name is Fumi, and in today's video, we're going to be discussing which privacy certification is better for you, the CIPP US or the CIPP E. So without further ado, just for explanation purposes, the CIPP US stands for Certified Information Privacy Professional for the United States, and the CIPPE stands for the Certified Information Privacy Professional for Europe. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about which exam is better for you, if you're trying to decide which privacy exam to take first, or maybe you've taken a couple of other privacy certifications and you're wondering which will be better for the type of privacy program that I am going to be working on, which one is better for my clients or my employer, I wanted to talk about the differences between the exam and what I've seen in the industry since I've been working in it for a number of years now. I think the CIPP US is well suited for individuals who either provide advisory to clients who provide products and services exclusively in the United States, or you are a privacy professional who works for the government or a state body, or if you work for a public service entity, because I know that sometimes they're different. And the reason I said that I think that these groups of organizations are well suited for the CIPP US is because the US privacy laws are going to probably come more into the scope of work that you provide than laws in the European Union. Now, the privacy landscape in the United States currently is fragmented. And what I mean by fragmented is, for the most part, there is no comprehensive privacy law in the United States. So most organizations here are either looking at privacy from a federal level, privacy from a state level, and privacy from an industry level. And some of the laws that you'll encounter when you're studying for the CIPP US include the GLBA, which stands for the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, which determines how privacy is conducted for financial institutions. You'll encounter COPPA, which is a privacy legislation that is focused and aimed at children. You'll encounter the CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act, which is focused on California residents. So a lot of the privacy laws that you'll encounter for the exam are going to be specific to a group of individuals or for an industry. Now, for the CIPP E, the European exam, a lot of the questions that you'll encounter have a Eurocentric perspective on how they are formulated. Now, in the European Union, there is the data protection law called the GDPR, and the GDPR is a comprehensive privacy legislation that looks at every industry, every company, every organization based on a very specific requirement. Now, if you are considering taking the CIPP E exam, take a look at the types of organizations and what their geography looks like. Now, there are a lot of global organizations in the United States that not only have a US component, but they also have a European entity. And if there is going to be the transfer of data from the United States to the European Union, you may consider doing the CIPP E exam because it focuses more on the requirements under the GDPR as opposed to the United States where it's industry, federal, state. There's a lot at play in the United States from a privacy landscape. Now, there have been talks in the last few years about the federal government creating a comprehensive privacy legislation that has not passed. So it's a patchwork of privacy legislation that organizations in the US have to grapple with as of 2025. If the organization that you are trying to provide advisory to operate on a global spectrum, then the CIPP E exam may be better suited for you. In addition to that, if you want to understand more about the European Union and how it operates, the CIPP may be well suited for you because it will give you insight into what a supervisory authority is, which is not a concept that is overly utilize in the United States. Currently, there is a regulatory body for privacy in California, but as of 2025, California is the only state with a regulatory body. That's not the same in Europe, where each country has a supervisory authority that oversees how data protection is implemented in each state. Another consideration that you might have before taking the CIPP US or CIPP E exam is bandwidth. Now, there are specific nuances in the CIPP E exam that I think takes additional studies for any student that's considering taking the test. The GDPR has many different components to it. And in addition to that, if you really want to understand the nuances with European Union law, you need to take a look at the opinions that are being offered by organizations like the EDPB. The supervisory authorities often come out with their own nuances to how the GDPR is interpreted. So there's additional complexities to understanding how privacy works in Europe. And it's the same thing in the United States. There have been opinions that have come out from different states and attorney generals about how personal data can be processed, particularly with the use of cookies. Now, one other thing I want to mention about considering taking the CIPP exam, I personally would recommend students who are working with organizations that are global to take that one first, because the GDPR is currently the most restrictive data protection law as of 2025. And by restrictive, I mean it offers the most amount of rights to its residents, and it has the most specific requirements for different organizations than other laws. If you take a look at some of the US states that have been coming out with their own privacy legislation, you can see that the language is very broad in its interpretation, and you can see that the thresholds are kind of high. The GDPR applies to organizations based on 3 criteria. Now, the thresholds in the United States have been, 35,000 residents, 10,000 residents where an organization sells data. A lot of these thresholds are not going to be met by most organizations in the United States, which means that the obligations on most organizations is not to protect personal data. But that's not the same case in the European Union. And there are really heavy enforcement actions that can occur for an organization that is non-compliant with the GDPR. But like I mentioned before, there's only one regulatory body in the United States currently. Even though most other states have the Attorney General to regulate how personal data is processed in the US, it's not the same in Europe. Based on what I've talked about, if you are considering taking the exam, I recommend, if your organization operates exclusively in the United States, or you work for a government agency or state agency, the CIPP US may be a better fit as opposed to the CIPP E, which I recommend for organizations that have a global atmosphere or are looking to create an entity in the European Union and are looking for a privacy professional to help them make sure that their program is compliant with the GDPR. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you are looking to take any of the privacy certifications that I've personally taken, I have resources in the description below. I really hope you enjoyed this content, and I'll see you in another video.